And now, broadcasting on Starworldwide Networks, it's In the Green Room. Our goal, to help save the planet one show at a time. Now, welcome to the Green Room.
Welcome, everyone, to In the Green Room. I'm Kinga.
And I'm Chet. I hope everybody's having a good day, even though it's been a little bit of a stressful week.
It's been a great day.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Day.
In the Green Room is your little happy place, your little positive zone where all we talk about is good news and good things.
And we're here saving the planet.
One show at a time. And we've got a legend in the studio today.
A legend. Gary Edens, say hello.
Hello, happy to be here, Kinga. I thought I knew you only on the trail as we hike each morning, and now I realize you're a famous host of a worldwide show.
You are the most famous, legendary radio broadcaster and also famous for your jingles. And I'm so just excited that you're here. I just can't. We talked about you coming on the show maybe 6 months ago, and I'm super excited. I know you're going to want to come back.
Oh, sure will. Yeah.
We also have Doc back in the studio. Can you say hi?
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Dr. James Kneller. And he's going to be giving us some health tips today, too. So I am so excited about your entire life and everything you have accomplished. It's really remarkable. Tell us what is the most memorable time of your life and how you transition from being a disc jockey to where you are now.
Well, I accidentally started in radio when I was in high school in Salisbury, North Carolina. They had a program called Teen Time, and they had a high school student on each afternoon on a local radio station between 4 and 5 p.m. And
Teen Time,
and he played the hits. And so a guy who was head of that show at the time was a senior, and he said, when I graduate, Gary, why don't you take it over? I said, I've never been on the radio. He said, well, come on and be on my show this afternoon. So I was. He said, hey, you're the man. You should take it over. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I became a disc jockey. Now, I didn't learn until later when I got into college that girls like jocks, but what they liked is real jocks, not necessarily disc jocks. But I did.
I feel like that's changed a little bit, though. Yeah. Nowadays, the girls might like the disc jockeys better.
Well, maybe so. At any rate, I did that for high school years, and then when I was in college at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I did it on the weekends, and then later I did it afternoon drive on WKIX, AM and FM in Raleigh, and I did afternoon drive from 3 to 7 each afternoon, Monday through Friday, and man, what a fun job that was.
How old were you at the time?
Well, I was maybe 20, 21, 22. I maybe started when I was 19 or something, but I thought I was the teenage rage. I had ratings of a 69% share in the Hooper ratings. In other words, 2/3 of the people who were listening to the radio were listening to my show.
Wow.
Well, what I didn't fully appreciate is they were listening to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all of that. But that sure helped get ratings, and it was on AM and FM. It was one of the first FM top 40 rock stations in America. So it was legendary. We served about 2.5 million people.
Wow.
Wow, that's
very
impressive. Did you choose all the songs, or were you told what to put on?
Well, there's a thing called Tribute to WKIX, which you've seen. Basically, it was almost freeform radio. Each show's host kind of played what he wanted to, even though we were supposed to play what the program director said, but we ignored that and played the hits and played what we wanted to and never got in trouble. And as long as the boss, Mr. Holder, liked you, that was okay.
Awesome.
So would you use vinyls and mix them in live? Or what was your equipment you were using?
They were 45s.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, right.
Well, I use some original turntables. I mean, they're Audio Technicas, new devices. But
well, some of the commercials were on these big long playing deals, but most of them were on tape cartridges by that time. We'd really advanced to tape cartridges.
Okay.
So what were some of your favorite musicians and bands at that time that you were playing?
Well, when I was a DJ in high school, it was Elvis Presley and all of these rock and roll singers, Little Richard and just all of the early days of rock and roll.
What about
But
Led Zeppelin or Rolling Stones? Were they around?
That was a little later. That
little
was
later.
more in the 60s. But when I started in the 50s, rock and roll had started with Bill Haley and the Comets and Rock Around the Clock and that sort of thing. So at any rate, I got pretty good with the music from about 1957 until I got out of radio in the 80s or so. So I enjoyed the music, but I also enjoyed the commercials. Because I wrote and sold commercials. My second job in radio, after I got my degree in business, was I decided to go into sales. I looked around the parking lot of the radio station where I worked, and I saw that most of the better cars were owned by guys in sales. And I'd majored in business, so I said, okay, I guess I'll be a salesman. So I started selling advertising. But I was okay at that because I would write the commercials and voice them, and so I had some success doing that. And,
Did you prefer the work you did on the radio, disc jockeying and working with the music side, or your advertisement work? Which one was more fun and fulfilling for you?
Well, they both were, but my road to moving up in management was getting into sales and then later management and then later ownership of radio stations. And so I've had every job there is in radio except being an engineer, probably.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, our engineer, Rockin' Robin, it's her birthday today. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday,
Robin.
So back to you, Gary Edens, who I'm just mesmerized by how you hike every single day with a big smile on, and you know everybody. It seems like you know every person on the mountain. It doesn't matter what time you go. You know everybody. How long have you been hiking?
Oh, I used to be a runner. In fact, our radio station, KOY, used to sponsor the Runner's Den KOY 10K with Rob Wallach of the Runner's Den. And so we kind of got in on the running craze in 1978, I want to say. So I ran for many, many years. And it wasn't until about 10 or 15 years ago that I switched over from running to hiking. You get as much exercise. You just have to hike longer than you run. But speaking of hiking, one of your guests from a few weeks ago, Gary Driggs, and I, 20 years ago, started something called the Two Garys Hikes, Gary Driggs and Gary Edens, and this will be our 20th anniversary, and we take about 8 or 10 fellows to interesting places like the Grand Canyon or Zion National Park or the Chiricahuas or the Wave or any number of places. We went to Tubac this year. So we're planning a 20th anniversary of our hike, and we'll probably have about 15 guys going to the Grand Canyon this year. But yes, I like to hike. I hike 7 days a week at 6:30 in the morning in the summer, and now we've gone to winter hours. It's 7 o'clock.
Oh, it's a little chilly at 7, damn.
Well, it was today. And then after we hike, we go to Starbucks, generally at the Camelback Inn. That's the best Starbucks in town with all that view. And then I go home and shower and shave, and then I'm usually at my office at the Hanover Companies by the crack of 10:30.
It's a good morning.
It's a great morning. So I want to hear more details of your amazing life and how you transitioned from, you were there in Raleigh,
Right. Mm-hmm.
North Carolina.
Yeah, let's pick back up
Right.
Yes.
on your transition from being, in the music side of radio into being in the sales side and then management and ownership.
Well,
So-
when I was at WKIX as a disc jockey, I thought the owner of the radio station should get some jingles from a company in Dallas called PAMS, P-A-M-S. It was the biggest jingle company in America. And so he said, well, if you want them, why don't you go to Dallas and produce them for us? So I went to Dallas and produced jingles for this radio station, WKIX. Here's one of them right here. This was a famous logo for the station. It's going to play any minute now.
Wonderful.
Here we go.
WKIX, Channel 85. This is Kicks Country.
Now, keep in mind, I'm a college student, and I went to Dallas, and I was, like a junior in college or something at the time. And so the general manager of the station said, well, Gary, you don't have a jingle. I said, well, I'd love to have a jingle. Well, that was a real honor for a DJ to have a jingle with his own name in it. So listen what we got.
It's the Gary Edith Show. Hey, Gare, is everything gold?
So this was the show opener for my show on WKIX.
WKIX, Channel 85. It's the Gary Edith Show.
Well, long story short, the people in Dallas at this jingle company decided they wanted me to become a jingle salesman. Well, I'd majored in business, and I knew I needed to get into sales at some point, so I worked in Dallas in 1966 through 68 as a jingle salesman and sold jingles to radio stations all over the world, including Australia, where my wife and I, we were newlyweds, went on our first international trip to Australia for 6 weeks and sold every radio station there was in Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide and Perth and Hobart,
A
Tasmania.
business trip and honeymoon tied into one?
It was our first international trip, and we came back by way of Singapore and Tokyo and Kyoto. So it was the beginning of our lifelong fascination with worldwide travel. But it was a great job. We became friends with a lot of Australian people. And then what happened is I was there for about 2.5 years selling the jingles all over. And one of my clients was Southern Broadcasting in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and they owned my former radio station, WKIX, in Raleigh. And they said, Gary, we know you're from the South, and you'd probably like to come home to North Carolina instead of being out there in Dallas, Texas all that time. Why don't you and your wife, Sue Ellen, come home to North Carolina? And maybe, you could probably eventually get into management in our company. I said, well, no. Well, isn't your son a senior at Princeton University? I assume that he's going to be the next president of this company. Oh, no, Gary. We have an anti-nepotism corporate rule. No members of anybody's family who's on the board or owner or officer of our company can ever work for it. You've got a better chance of becoming president of this company than my son. He'll have to do something else. Okay, I'll join you. So I joined them in Raleigh in 1968 as a radio time salesman at WKIX. And then what happened is a couple of years after, being pretty successful, selling advertising, radio commercials, Mr. Johnson, who was the head of Southern Broadcasting Company, and his vice president, had lunch with my wife and me and said, Gary, we think you and Sue Ellen ought to consider going out to our radio station out there in Phoenix. We're not doing as well as we'd hoped. It's the #1 first radio station ever in Arizona, but it's not doing as well as it ought to do, and I think maybe you could get into management in our company. This way we'd have one of our own people from North Carolina out there running KOY. Well, that's a long way off. I've never been to Arizona. Well, why don't you go out there and see what you think of it? So they put us up at the Camelback Inn on October 29th, 1969, and my wife, Sue Ellen, and I said, hey, this is pretty good. Why don't we take this job? And they said, now, Gary, we're only going to keep you out there for 1.5 or 2 years at most. Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So I got out here, and 6 months after I'd been a salesman at KOI, they made me the general manager. So I'm 28 years old, general manager of the first radio station in Arizona. And, man, things started happening. We hired good people. We turned the radio station around. And it became the #1 AM radio station in Phoenix, along with our FM, KOI FM, which was the former KQYT, Quiet 95. We changed it to Y95. And so we were #1 up until about 1982, all those years that I managed those stations, not because of me, but because of my ear for talent and hiring good people.
So moving from sales to being the manager of your station, what was that transition like, and did you like the feeling of being in charge and having the control, or because it seems like you obviously thrived in that position if they promoted you to general manager? So,
well, you're never really in control of everything, but you hire the talented people, and I guess that is what my greatest skill was, hearing talent and being able to hire good people on the air. Bill Haywood was on our station for 13 years and was named the Billboard Magazine Grand International Personality of the Year. It's hard to beat that.
Yeah.
So that's what helped us do well with all of our radio stations. And then to transition into more management, Southern Broadcasting sold the radio stations to a public company, Hart Hanks Communications, in 1978. And the head of Southern Broadcasting resigned, and so eventually they asked me to be president of the radio company. And so in 1982, I became president of what was known as Hart Hanks Radio, but it was formerly Southern Broadcasting. And then we, in 1984, put together an investor group and bought the company and pushed ego aside and simply named the company Eden's Broadcasting. Well, at least this way, when I went around, they know who was in charge, you know. And, oh, gosh, I had so much debt. I squeaked when I walked. You know, we bought it from Hart Hanks Communications, and we had a number of investors. But a real mentor of mine was Carl Eller here in Phoenix, the head of, at the time, Combined Communications. And so he helped
Chet,
me.
you've met Carl Eller because he was good friends with your grandpa, Chet.
Yeah.
He helped me put together some investors, some venture capital companies. One guy used to be head of Fox in L.A. and another guy in Austin, Texas. So we raised some money and we bought the company, and we had some good times. We bought a couple of stations in San Diego in 1987 and literally went from worst to first. In 6 months, we went from number 26 in the ratings to number 1.
Wow.
Worst to first.
Q106.
So how did you go from worst to first? Just by hiring the right people?
Hiring
And
hiring the right people as general manager and program director and sales manager, and they knew how to hire the right people because, you know, it all starts from the top down. I look at successful companies like Bruce Halley at Discount Tire. Every Discount Tire is a great operation, and it all started at the top with Bruce Halley. He instilled, you know, a customer-friendly kind of base. Another example is Herb Kelleher at Southwest Airlines. You know, they love their employees. And if you love the employees will teach the customers right. So that was kind of our philosophy. I mean, you know, Apple's the same way. Everybody likes Apple, and it started, you know, with the management of Apple. Very good, you know.
Having a great boss.
Steve Jobs and now Tim Cook. You know, it starts at the top. But individual businesses start at the top, too. So we had very, very good general managers at our radio stations over the years.
So when the stations were the worst and then they went to first, did you have to fire people to get it to be first?
Well, we even learned the best way from lawyers to terminate people, and the lawyers told us say as little as possible and be vague. Otherwise, you know, you could get sued. And so there's a skill in knowing how to ask someone to leave your company. One way is to say, you know, Kinga, it's just not a good fit for us. You know what I mean? No, well, it just doesn't fit right. But you know, we've certainly enjoyed having you here, and have a good next career. We'll certainly give you a recommendation.
Did you have to be the one to say this to the manager or assistant manager? Did you actually have to be the person that?
No,
did that?
the department heads.
I'm sure you've had to say that a few times.
Well, you know, if I let a manager go or something like that, but you know, the people down the line are trained to, even if they have to terminate somebody, let them keep their self-esteem.
Part ways amicably so that you're on good terms. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That definitely makes
Well,
sense.
But you ask a very difficult question. How did you go from worst to first? If I could all write that down and answer that question succinctly, I would be a consultant to every radio station in America.
That'd be the magic formula. Yeah.
Well, part of it is, are you going into a market with a radio station where the kind of format that you think you want to do is not being done or not being done well?
So what do you think about today's podcast boom? Because
Good question.
it's crazy how many shows are coming out every single day. It's but there's like, I don't know, it's kind of watering down the like corporate sponsorship aspect of it, but it's also cool because it's giving shows more freedom and more leeway, that not as censored and controlled. So what is
for
your
example,
take
Joe
on
Rogan's show?
or this show? Well,
our
it's
show.
awesome. We're able to say basically whatever we want, interview whoever we want. We don't have anybody controlling us. So it's
Well,
a pretty,
that's fine, but when I came up in radio, it was advertiser supported and it was local, and so you sold advertising to local advertisers, and that's what financed all this. I'm not sure how podcasts
It's-
become enormously successful from a revenue standpoint. I know there
It's
are many
basically-
specialties in podcasts that have
It's-
small audiences, and they go narrow and deep, which is very smart. You know, like I listen to a podcast each week from Barron's Magazine, and it's free, and you push the button, and you hear 30 minutes of the guys at Barron's talking about their upcoming issue. And
I'm sure
it,
they're
it kind of
sponsored.
promotes their magazine, and so, you know, it doesn't cost them anything to do it. They get in a room like this and start talking for 30 minutes.
Well, Gary, we get sponsors, and people pay to be on the show and sponsor, and we can say whatever we want, and I love it.
well, yeah, it's definitely,
great. Yeah,
it's definitely more of an abstract structure, but yeah, you can still find good advertisers. It just takes a little bit more work, I think, and you know, just straight effort trying to find the right fit to sponsor the show and who like believes in your content. But
Right,
it's
absolutely.
just definitely an interesting boom in like radio and podcasting.
Well, over-the-air television and over-the-air radio, their listenership and viewership has gone down because of streaming. And, I mean, think about listening to your favorite kind of music, let's say from the 70s or 80s, on Spotify, where you listen to precisely the kind of playlist you want with no commercials, or XM Sirius satellite. So I'm kind of glad I'm not in the over-the-air radio business where you depend on at least 8 to 10 commercial minutes per hour. And, you know, there were always button pushers who'd punch out the commercials. But it's kind of an interesting business that used to be.
Birthday Girl has a comment. I know she used to work for one of your radio stations. So, Robin, happy birthday again. We'd like to hear from Robin.
Thank you. And I want to just fill Gary in on kind of the difference between AM, FM, and podcasting. And I actually got my butt busted coming in here my first night training on this job after spending 30 years on AM, FM. Both Gary and I are old school. So we know how things work on the regular dial, that you can't say certain things and you can't do certain things while you're on the air.
Right.
So my first week of training here, almost 3 years ago, I come in here and the other guy that used to work here, Craig, used to do the studio directing for the green room.
Oh, Craig was great.
And,
we miss Craig.
I had this weird thing happen, and it really freaked me out because Julie, your old manager, put all these wine glasses out on the table over here, popped open 2 bottles of wine, and started pouring wine. So I look over at Craig and I like punch him in the shoulder. I'm like, dude, what the F is this? Because as Gary knows, old school radio, you're not allowed to have any alcohol while you're on the air. Right, Gary?
I think that was the rule, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I got my first education from transitioning from regular AM, FM radio to working in podcasting. It's the same setup. There's a lot more electronics. We play more the engineer than the engineer because back in our day in radio, we weren't allowed to touch a lot of things. We had to call the PD, the program director, and have the engineer come in and fix them. But I did have to go climb the tower and replace the light bulb one day at KUPD because the engineer was out of town and I was dumb enough to do it because I was young. But
Was that when Chuck Artigue ran it?
yes, actually it was.
He was a neighbor of mine and good friend, and he ran 3 radio stations. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, good old Chuck. I miss him. But,
So, question, did Dave Pratt actually ever work for one of your radio stations?
No.
Okay, he didn't. Okay.
But he was very successful as a competitor.
So he was a
Very
competitor.
successful, right.
So hi, Dave Pratt. If you listen to this show, I know he says he listens to all our shows. So
Right.
Dave Pratt, here's the Gary Edens, your competitor.
So it'll be interesting to see if some of those radio stations that are still, you know, part of the traditional method, if they're going to adapt their advertising structure to like how podcasts are doing it now, or if they're going to try to stay the same.
They already have. If you've noticed, most of the AM, FM stations on the dial are taking segments from their shows and putting them into podcast form. So you have, like, a morning show is usually 3 to 4 hours on the dial. they'll take it and break it up into segments of 23 to 25 minutes and upload it in podcast segments. And sometimes you will get advertisers, but a lot of times the spots aren't included.
So they're
Well,
just
interestingly enough, you're talking about AM and FM. I drive a Tesla because I'm very green, and I like electric cars. At any rate, my Tesla does not have an AM radio in it.
Wow.
Nor does it have a CD player. Those are so old school.
So how do you play your music?
Spotify.
yeah from his phone.
Really?
Yeah.
I
yeah.
love it.
Oh, yeah. You can even talk into it. Say, Spotify, play me the Beatles. And it'll
Wow,
play
I
it.
didn't realize that Teslas don't have an actual radio.
If it's the newest Tesla, he doesn't have to drive it.
It doesn't have an AM radio. It has FM stations, and it has HD stations, so you can get anything. But it doesn't have, 550 AM KOY or 620 KTAR. That's so old school. It doesn't have it.
Well,
Interesting.
Most of the stations that were on the AM dial have now moved over to the FM side. Like KTAR's moved over to the FM side.
Right.
They're now 92.3.
Right.
The same thing with sports channels that were
Right.
on the AM dial. They're now moved over to the FM dial
Right.
because AM's pretty much going out of style.
Right.
So back to your Tesla. We are here saving the planet
One show at a time.
And Gary also has tennis shoes that are eco-friendly, that are made out of what, recycled plastic from the ocean?
The shoestrings are, right. Yeah. These are called Allbirds, and a friend of mine is one of the original investors of this company in San Francisco, but they're called Allbirds. It's a company that has shoes made from wool from New Zealand, and the proprietor of the company, the guy who started, is from New Zealand. We said, why'd you name it Allbirds? He said, well, before there were people in New Zealand, it was all birds. But you can remember the name, and it's mostly online, though they do have stores in San Francisco and Chicago and New York and a few places. But I've got about 7 pairs of these. They're $95. You order them online. They're the most comfortable shoes in the world. So you should contact Allbirds to be a sponsor.
That's a great idea.
Well, you need to get a pair first. You'll like it, and you'll keep buying them.
I think we all need a pair.
These
Definitely.
shoestrings are made from recycled plastic bottles found in the ocean. So
I love
it's very
it.
green.
I love it. So thank you. And I know we had a long discussion about how you believe in being eco-friendly. You believe in recycling and picking up trash and not polluting the ocean and getting the plastic out. But you don't really believe in climate change.
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I said I don't believe in extreme issues to climate change, like the Green New Deal and that sort of thing. But we're not going to talk politics.
No, we're not. No, I'm really
Okay.
happy that
Okay.
you drive your Tesla
Right.
and you wear those recycled shoes and you care about recycling, and that makes me
Well,
happy.
yeah,
And
Why-
I'm a guy at the top of the trail who picks up the garbage left by the people the night before and put it in the trash can. I hate to see litter on the trail.
Yeah, wanting the world to be clean
Yeah,
shouldn't be
right.
political. It's just common sense and loving the environment. Yeah.
Right.
But so one question I have for Gary is to any other aspiring people that are, starting a business in a cutthroat industry, what are a few tips you would give them to, help them make those goals actually happen? Because I don't know, there could be somebody listening right now, or me. I'm starting my own record label right now, and the music industry is as cutthroat as it gets. So basically, what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs that are starting up so that they can hopefully get to the top like how you did?
You mean as a DJ or on air or
Everything.
Well,
Well,
I want to I want to have a recording label,
Right.
so I want to
Yeah.
distribute music. So it's a
Right.
little bit different, but I also perform live. So
Right.
I would be open to DJing on the radio too. The more the merrier is the way I see it. But basically, everybody that I talk to is always saying, the music industry is so cutthroat. A lot of people say, oh, you should try to just get signed onto a big label because they'll do all the promotion for you. I don't really want to go that route. I want to control my own brand.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I just wanted any advice you have,
Great question, Chet.
ways that'll keep me focused, moving forward, and building my brand up.
Well, as far as music goes, I think if you put out a record, it's got to be different than something else. It can't just be a cover that sounds like everybody else. But you look back at the various groups that we've had. For example, the Beach Boys were so popular in part because they used that tight male harmony, and they kind of got the idea of that tight male harmony from the Four Freshmen. And they used that harmony, but they used instrumentals that were very upbeat and that sort of thing. And certainly the Beatles, had wonderful lyrics and wonderful singers. And
Love the Beatles.
There had been nothing like the Beatles ever.
True.
Elvis Presley became a huge star because he had a wonderful voice, but he had a certain character that was so unlike any other singer of the time. So at the end of the day, it's about the talent that you put on the record, and it has to be different to get noticed, really. It just can't blend in with all the other stuff.
100%. Well, yeah, today there's so many talented artists out there that probably won't ever actually find commercial success because there's so much talent out there nowadays. Like, there's already 7 billion people out there. So that's why you really have to set yourself aside from like a marketing and distribution standpoint and basically how you're running the corporate side of your business. You need to have high quality music and unique records and a successful, efficient business plan too.
And also connections help.
Oh yeah, well obviously that doesn't hurt.
The owner of that radio station really liked you, and he kept.
Well, he was a fellow graduate of the University of North Carolina, and
There
he
you
wanted
go.
a Tar Heel running his Phoenix radio station.
And it's pretty remarkable how you then said, okay, now I want to own all of these radio stations. I mean, it's really amazing what you've accomplished in
thank
your
you.
life.
Thank you.
And we need to get to the fact that he's also an artist. He took up painting
Wow.
how long ago?
About 20 years ago.
Yes.
And right now, my wife passed away in January, and it's been very therapeutic for me to take art lessons. So I take from an old friend of mine who I knew from the Phoenix Art Museum, the Men's Arts Council. His name is Bill Lundquist, and he taught for the Scottsdale Artist School, and that's where I first started taking painting lessons. But right now I'm taking about 3 days a week for 3 hours a day. And
Wait,
so
3 days
this-
a week for 3 hours
Right,
each time.
and I've done 4 pretty good-sized oil paintings so far this year, but it is therapeutic. I told Bill Lundquist he could charge me what a shrink charges because it's very therapeutic. I don't think about any of my problems like being a widower and having lost my wife of 54 years. I think about how can I make this painting really, really good.
You had a beautiful marriage. What was the secret to being married that long?
We just never had any harsh words. We just agreed on so many things, and we both loved to travel, and we had 2 wonderful daughters. One is 49, one is 47. One lives in Greenwich, Connecticut, and married to a really great guy, and she has 3 kids, and one is married and lives here in Phoenix, and is married to a 5th-generation Arizonan, and she has 3 kids. So we just had a great marriage and great kids growing up, and now
And you volunteered together. You showed me some videos
Yes.
of the whole family volunteering.
Well, my wife was very involved in a number of charities, including the Barrow board, Barrow
Neurological.
Institute, and they have the Barrow Ball each year, the Barrow Grand Ball. She was chairman of that one year, but at any rate, sadly, she died of a ruptured aneurysm, and so our family is going to do something special for their study of aneurysm at Barrow. But one of the charities that we got involved in as a family a few years ago is one that's not very well known, and I showed you some pictures of it. It's called Feed My Starving Children, and it's where we got all of our grandkids and both of my daughters together, and we went out to someplace in Mesa, and we filled up these boxes with food that was being sent off to Thailand, and it was just interesting having all the kids involved in
That's so
helping
beautiful.
people that don't have enough food, and it was sent off, and so it's a great charity. It's not very well known. We've helped things like the fill up the food boxes at Christmas time for the Salvation Army or St. Mary's Food Bank, that sort of thing. But this Feed My Starving Children is a new one that we've discovered that we particularly like.
Well, you're a beautiful family for giving back and helping others in need, and I just really, you're just such a role model for everybody out there. happily married for so long, great kids, worked your way up to owning all these radio stations, and now you're with your company, Hanover, which I don't really quite understand what Hanover does, but can you give us a little tiny glimpse?
Well, when we sold the radio stations in 1993, I had a non-compete contract with the people who bought the radio stations here in Phoenix and in San Diego, and so I couldn't be in radio for 5 years, and I was only 52, so I was too young to retire, and I didn't want to retire anyway, but they paid me a non-compete. Otherwise, I could have gone into the radio stations and swiped all the talent and taken them across the street.
Taking another one first to worst, yeah.
That's right. But at any rate, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I started investing largely in the stock market, but some land investments, and that was a good time to do it, about 1993, 94, and I enjoyed it, and so I formed a Subchapter S corporation and came up with the name the Hanover Companies. I wanted it to sound like it'd been around a long time. Hanover is a name. It's the county where my grandfather and my mother were born, New Hanover County in North Carolina. But the Hanover
cool.
Companies sounds like it's been around forever. Well, it's been around here since 1993. So I got, in the early days of the internet, I got Hanover.com. So I was Edens at Hanover.com. But basically what we are is we are a family office, and I manage our family's assets, and hope I do a good job.
So you're like a stockbroker?
No, I don't broker anything.
Okay.
I'm a stock picker.
Oh,
there's
okay,
a difference.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, I direct the companies I use. I use Morgan Stanley, and I direct what I want them to buy, and it's companies kind of like Apple and Google, and
Tesla isn't too bad either.
And I don't have Tesla. I kind of like to buy companies that consistently make money. I probably should have bought it. It's done very well as a stock, but I don't have it. But I do have companies that make consistent good profits. Many of them pay dividends, like Apple, Blackstone. That's a company that my son-in-law was with for many years. They pay a nice dividend. So basically, I'm an investor, and so I, thanks to iPhones and being able to be connected all the time, I can be in touch. So I can travel and I can still do my job as long as I know what the market's doing and can get the information I need to make intelligent decisions. And if you make, as a stock picker, if you make more right decisions over a long period of time, you do well. And it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. The longer you're in the market with good stocks, the better you do. I bought Berkshire Hathaway 30 years ago.
Damn.
And still have it. Okay, and went to the Warren Buffett, my wife and I went to the Warren Buffett annual meeting in Omaha, and that was an experience. It's like going to an investment seminar to hear the world's greatest investor, talk for 5 hours after the meeting ends. He answers questions. I remember one was...
Was that interesting?
Well, yeah, one was, Mr. Buffett, would you on your tombstone like for it to say, here lies the world's richest man? No, ma'am, I'd like it to say, here lies the world's oldest man.
That was a good answer.
Right.
So you actually got to meet Warren Buffett and spend time with him?
I didn't spend time with him. I was one of 12,000 people at his meeting, but...
Oh, okay. Well, that was interesting.
But I do admire him, right.
Well, so tell us about meeting Bill Clinton.
Oh, okay. I told you to ask me
yes.
that question. Yeah, that was on the back of my bio. What are some of the most memorable things you've happened along? Well, I had a very good friend who was also in the radio business. He was in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he owned a station there, and his name was Jerry Atchley. He was a great guy, but he was good friends with Bill Clinton, Governor Bill Clinton, who was, governor there for about 10 years. And his lawyer was Hillary Clinton. At any rate, he said, you got to meet Bill Clinton sometime. He's going to be president. And I said, well, okay, sounds good to me. So I was in New York City, up there talking to the banks, begging for money. And
begging for money?
Need some investors.
Well, I had so much debt, I squeaked when I walked. I was splaining away what we're doing with it. They didn't understand radio. We don't have any assets. We have disc jockeys and a few buildings, but that's basically it. You know, it's kind of blue sky company. Your value is based on how you do in the ratings, and you know that's why it was so important to have high ratings. At any rate, it was in July of 1992, and Bill Clinton was a candidate to be the nominee of the Democratic Party for president. And on the day that he actually was nominated, I was running in Central Park, and I'd finished up my run around the reservoir and everything, and these limousines came by. There were 3 limousines, and out popped the first one, 2 guys that came around to the second limousine, and they opened the door, and lo and behold, it was Governor Bill Clinton. I'm 10 feet away from the guy, so I came up to him and I said, "Governor Clinton, I'm Gary Edens, a friend of Jerry Atchley's. Jerry Atchley tells me how to vote for you." "Well, Gary, I don't know if you vote for me, but I hope you'll run with me. Would you run with me in Central Park, Gary?" I said, "Well, I'd be honored to, Governor Clinton." So I ran with Bill Clinton for about 2 more miles all around Central Park, and everybody said, "Yay, Bill! Yay, Bill! Go, Bill!" So then afterwards, and he was the nicest guy in the world, afterwards I called my friend Jerry Atchley and said, "Jerry, you'll never guess who I ran with in Central Park this morning." "Who'd you run with?" "Your buddy." "Oh, did you run with Bill Clinton?" I said, "I sure did." "Well, what'd you think?" I said, "Well, he's a nice guy." He said, "Well, did you get any pictures?" I said, "Well, no, but there were, pictures being taken." He said, "You go down to the Associated Press at 30 Rockefeller Center and tell them you're a member of it," which you are, "and tell them you want some pictures of yourself running with Bill Clinton." So I went down there and said, "Do you have any pictures of Governor Clinton running?" "Oh, yes, we got pictures of everything he does. Here, look at this. Oh, I'll take this one and this one and this one." He said, "You send them to me in Little Rock, and I'll get Bill to sign them." So I sent him. A week later, "Gary, great running with you in Central Park, Bill Clinton." And so my buddy, Jerry, said, "Gary, I know you're a Republican and all that, but won't it be good to have a friend in the White House? Vote for Bill." So I did.
I love your impersonation. That's a great Bill Clinton. So.
Well, he's such a likable guy, and he was a pretty darned effective president.
Well, your voices are it's just really interesting to listen to you talk. You're really good at doing impersonations.
Were you ever on the mic on the air then, or you never had your own show?
I did have my own show for about 7 years. Right?
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say you're so
Gary
talented on the
Eden
mic,
show.
and you just have that radio voice. So
actually, I still do some as a hobby voiceover work. I do political commercials like, "With Obama in the White House, we can't afford to have another Democrat in Congress. Be afraid. Be very afraid." Those kind of things. Those are they're negative spots, and I'm an equal opportunity offender. I'll do it from Republicans, Democrats, I don't care. But I do them back east because they don't like to use voices that are well known out here. So back east, I've done lots of political commercials and a few other type commercials, but by and large political commercials.
But you do both sides. But Republican and Democrat.
Absolutely. They call me the phantom voice of doom.
I was going to say, I feel like I could recognize your voice from somewhere. Maybe it was from one of those attacks.
Well, they did a feature on me a few years ago on Channel 10. Right after an election, they said, "Hey, these commercials that run all the time now that the elections are over, here's a guy who did them. You probably heard him before." And, well, they hadn't here in Phoenix. They hadn't heard me. I hadn't been on the air in Phoenix. Was on the air back east, but it was fun. It's kind of a hobby to do that. I don't make my living doing voiceovers.
Do your phantom voice again.
Yeah, do the phantom voice.
"With Obama in the White House."
No, the other one, your phantom voice.
The phantom voice of doom?
Yes.
"Be afraid. Be very afraid."
Yes, master.
Oh, good timing.
Well, actually, what they want now in voiceover, not on political stuff, but is people who haven't been on the radio. They just want regular sounding people. So when I do some commercials, the guy says, hey, knock it off. Forget that you were ever on the radio. Just read the commercial like a regular person, okay? Don't use that radio voice. Charlie Van Dyke can do that, the voice of Channel 12.
You do have you have a variety of voices. That's so exciting. Did your wife get to enjoy all your sounds and voices?
She was a blind date, and I was on the radio with these huge ratings, and I was, a legend in my own mind. At any rate, she'd never heard of me. So that made it pretty appealing. I said, well, what radio station? She said, oh, we listen to that when it plays the music. WKX. Yeah, that's the one we listen to. Well, I'm on the air there every afternoon. I just never have really noticed who's on the air. I just like the music. But I knew she was the one. The first time I met her, she was a blind date. Yeah.
Aww.
Right. Yeah.
That's so awesome that you knew from the minute you met her.
Yep, that's right.
So who set you up?
A fraternity brother of mine in Chapel Hill. It was on. It was to have been on November 22nd, 1963, and it was going to be the Beat Duke parade. My fraternity was building a float for the Beat Duke parade, and President Kennedy was assassinated that day, so I had to call this young girl over at Meredith College, a girls' college. Said, oh, terrible about the president. Everything's been called off, and I'll call you again sometime. So about a week or two later, I called her, and that was the last date I ever had. I knew. I don't know if she knew, but I knew.
Oh, that's
and we
beautiful.
got married a year and a half later. Yeah.
How did you propose?
I don't think I was quite as romantic as she had hoped. We were walking by a jewelry store, and I said, why don't we go in here? Let me see if I could buy something that you might like. We need to get married.
That was pretty
So I
smooth.
bought her a
really
ring,
special.
but she got to help pick it out, and I'd already asked her dad,
Oh, that's very,
Yeah,
very
right,
sweet.
yeah, she
Still
knew
pretty smooth,
yeah.
though. Walk her past the jewelry store. That's a pretty good move, actually.
Yeah. Well, it worked. And it wasn't a very large diamond, and, I bought what I could afford. But, over the years, I've seen women who've had diamonds that are so big they have their own zip code. And I've said to Sue Ellen, let me get you a bigger diamond. No, I like this one. This is just fine. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
She was a very low-maintenance wife. She never really pushed me to, do expensive stuff and all of that. She kept her Lexus for 15 years.
Wow.
Wow.
I said, don't you want a new car? No, this drives like a new car. I don't need a new car.
That's
Wives like
beautiful.
that are hard to find.
Well, you're a very happy guy. You had a happy marriage and beautiful. Everything you've created is turned to gold. So,
Oh, no, we had our ups and downs. I mean, I had so much debt with these banks, and they were going through problems, too. They said, Gary, you've tripped all these covenants. We could foreclose and everything. So I just pull out the keys and throw them on their desk and say, here, you run the radio station. Oh, no. We want you to. But, we do want our money back someday. So, we politely agreed to sell them over a 2-year period or so. Not at a fire sale, but we agreed to sell them because they didn't understand what they had. They didn't understand what the assets were. Well, we didn't have many assets. Some of our stations were in rented property, and, all we had was talent. And that's hard for bankers to get their arms around and say, how much is this radio station really, really, really worth?
Too many intangible assets with that, then. But
Right.
so one question I have is, how do you stay so humble? Because I know a lot of people that have 1/4 your resume that are, cocky. I'm not going to say it, a-holes. But,
Well,
so yeah, how do you keep your...
I don't know that I am humble. I'm probably not humble, but I had a wife who, if I talked too much at a party or something like that, driving home, she said, Gary, you need to improve your listen-to-talk ratio.
See, it's a humble response to say. But
No, she was right. But I would say, well, Sue Ellen, you married a former disc jockey who likes to have an audience. I know, but still you need to let others talk more, and you need to listen more.
see, it's really sweet how you keep always giving her credit. That's really a great husband.
Well, I really do, yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
We never had any major arguments.
I hope you-
except that I talked too much and didn't listen enough. But it was never harsh words. She would, women talk differently, and I think y'all speak in code and stuff like. She didn't speak to me in commands like she'd be in the car. and she would say, "Does it seem hot to you?" Well, why didn't she just say, "Gary, would you make it cooler in the car, please?" "Does it seem hot to you?" Yeah. And she wouldn't say, "Gary, slow down." She would say, "Gary, remember the speed limit." "Okay, I do remember it. Why?" "You're going too fast."
So she was a little bit passive aggressive, but was friendly with it.
Oh,
Sounds like.
very, very friendly with it. Right.
See, I'm
Very.
aggressive. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I'm like, yeah, do this.
Right.
But I need a little bit of that, chill, zen, listening skills. So
Right.
I'm glad I
Well,
picked your brain about that a little bit.
a good marriage, really, in the early days during the courtship, it goes from 3 words: "I love you." You say that a lot. And then later on in the marriage, to make it successful, it kind of gets reduced down to 2 words: "You're right." As usual. Right again. It's really simple. You got to know the right words to say.
And I bet you made her laugh all the time.
Well, she had a pretty good sense of humor. At her funeral, they put together this little Sue Ellen book, and it was all these Sue Ellenisms, and it was all these funny lines. Some of them were from North Carolina that she learned, like, "Good night from Goldsboro." Well, that was a line that her father had, and he was a funny guy, and so they had these caricatures of her and all these funny lines that she used. And so we gave these books out to the people who came to the reception. They had 800 people at her funeral.
800 people at her funeral.
And, the good thing about
Amazing.
about that was she died before the pandemic. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a funeral. I feel so sorry for people who died and can't have funerals, or people who want to have a wedding and they can't. But it was at the St. Francis Xavier Church, and we're not members of that. Our church, Valley Presbyterian, was being remodeled, so we needed a bigger place. And so the Jesuits there were kind enough to let us use their church, and we thought it'd be a Catholic/Presbyterian service. And the Jesuits down there said, no, you all run it the way you want to. Dr. David Joint's Presbyterian, run a Presbyterian service. So we did.
Beautiful.
But it was really a beautiful service, and it was about 800 people who came because she was just so well loved. She never talked politics. I don't think people knew if she was a Republican or a Democrat. She never talked about wealth or lack of wealth. "Oh, I know that guy. He's probably worth $15 billion. She would never talk about that kind of stuff. I say, "Well, what do y'all talk about on your walk?" She would walk every morning also with ladies. "Oh, we'd talk about kids, grandkids, husbands, recipes, nothing controversial." Well, that's why everybody liked her. She was just so pleasant. She never had an unkind word about anybody.
And that's the way to be. That's
right.
the way to be.
Absolutely.
We only have 2 minutes left, and Dr. James Kneller is here, and he was going to give us a health tip on relating to your painting and laughter. Do you have any questions for...
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I really enjoyed your story.
Thank
I
you.
would have asked you about your role as a public influencer and the responsibility you felt for controlling public perception of events, or controlling public mood by choosing radio music for your listeners, especially in a time when radio was everything because we had nothing else.
I just tried to pick good, talented people who were good. One of the DJs I heard early on who went on to later fame is Glenn Beck. He did the Y Morning Zoo along with Tim Hattrick, and this was before he was famous. But man, he was really a good disc jockey before he became the Glenn Beck, who is now nationally known.
Well,
So
you're
how
controlling
important-
stress, which is fantastic.
Right.
Because people are
Thank you.
tuning into you and they're identifying with you as their
Thank you.
stress relief, and that is so important for everybody to be able to turn that off.
Thank you.
Well, I feel laughter when I see... Gary makes me laugh, and when somebody makes you laugh, that's good for your health.
Yeah, absolutely.
How important is that?
It's exceedingly important. We're appreciating that more and more. The hormones of stress coursing through our bodies are degrading our physiology in so many ways and aging us.
Yeah.
And having a way to switch that off and quickly and reliably is fantastic. And you being in that role and providing that for so many people for so many years is fabulous.
Well, thank you.
Well, he makes everyone laugh.
Absolutely.
Gary Edens, thank you so much for being here. I hope we can get you as often as you'll be here.
Thank you for having me, Kinga.
Thank you so much. Saving the planet
One
show at a time.
Thank you for listening to In the Green Room. Join us here live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. or anytime on demand 24/7 on StarWorldWideNetworks.com.